that's good. I got a really interesting message from my Twitter feed just before I came up here. Couldn't believe this. The NPL, the National Psychologists League, has been doing research apparently for 3 years, and they've come up with some very interesting discoveries. Turns out that 1 in every 5 Americans is weird. Yeah, I know. That's crazy town, isn't it? I have never heard of the NPL, the National Psychologists League. That's nuts. But the statistics I agree with. Let's test it out real quick here. What I want you to do is just look at the person to your left. Now look at the person to your right. Look at someone in front of you. Look at someone behind you. If they all look normal, you're it. Now let's take it one step further. I want everybody, if you think you are normal, I want you to raise your hand real high. Okay, half delusional, half crazy out there. We're on a journey with a bunch of weirdos in a weird world. And one of the best ways to combat that is with laughter, I think. But just strange things happening all the time. For example, the other day, I got kicked out of Victoria's Secret. Apparently, they frown on guys going in there with sandwiches, lawn chairs, and beer and making an afternoon out of it. I had no idea. There's nothing more embarrassing than getting your butt kicked by 3 women in sexy underwear. I'm going back next week with a keg and a kiddie pool full of lime jello. That is going to be one heck of a restraining order right there. I went across the mall to this place where you can get your handwriting analyzed. Has anybody ever had this done? They do it with a computer. You write your name on a piece of paper. They pop it in a computer, and based on your curly cues and your ascenders and your descenders and your actual signature, they can tell you a lot of information about yourself. It's a little pricey. It's like $300, but I did it. Put my information in. The computer kicks out that I am gullible, easily fooled, and susceptible to con men and scam artists. So, totally worth it. So then I went to Wendy's to get a bite to eat. And at Wendy's old-fashioned hamburgers, some of the stores have this on their tables. It's a comment card. And on the card it says, at Wendy's old-fashioned hamburgers, you are the chairman of the board. I haven't gotten paid yet. I haven't been invited to any of the meetings. I go next door to the Target store. They have a similar thing at their checkout. It's got a picture of a Target store employee on the front, and on it, it says, I'm reading your mail. Yeah, these pinheads at Target are taking my Wendy's checks. I am not happy about that. There's weird stuff all the time. Read the newspaper, listen to the news. Weird stuff happening all the time. The Food and Drug Administration has just released their yearly list of acceptable amounts of rodent hair and insect body parts allowable in food. Yeah, I swear. Really, FDA? Acceptable amounts? How about no flies in my cherry pies? Spider legs in my enchilada? How about nada? It's not like you find a rat hair in your Big Mac and you go, all right, I find 3 more of these, I'm taking this thing back. It doesn't work like that. Sometimes the weird stories are buried inside of a really cool story. This is a really cool story I just heard. There's an organization in this country that takes underprivileged children and sends them down to Orlando, Florida, to Disney World, free of charge. This is a cool program with one critical flaw. They're taking these poor kids out of their rat-infested homes and sending them to a land where the mice are 10 feet tall. It's crazy. All I'm saying is the world is crazy, and maybe, just maybe, laughter is a cure. Hi, I'm Tom, and I'm a comedian. Got my 28-year chip today, pretty excited about that. I wasn't always a comedian. I didn't start out as a comedian. In fact, when I was very young, my parents thought that I was going to be very successful in the field of product manufacturing. My dad said when I was a baby, I was a pooping machine. And this was a great gig for someone that age, at that very young age at that time. I had the 3 things you needed to be successful as an entrepreneur in that business. I had no startup costs, I had no inventory costs, and I had no bowel control. My parents took care of all of this. All I had to do was sit back, take in raw materials, and push out product. It was great. Until about 2 years in, when my parents decided that they wanted to change the method of distribution. The next thing you know, we are flushing product right down the toilet. Of course, let's be honest, the product was, well, you know. But I had other than this inauspicious beginning, I had a fairly normal childhood. I was the 5th of 5 kids, which freaked my mom out the entire time she was pregnant with me. She had read in some magazine somewhere that every 5th child born was Chinese. Now, I was no Wolfgang Amadeus show-off, composing symphonies at age 8. I mean, I could have done it. I absolutely could have. I mean, how hard can that be? The problem was I had the wrong equipment. It's very hard to compose a symphony on something like this. It's half an octave. I couldn't do it. I needed a real instrument. I needed something like that. But even that, you know, it wasn't. I didn't have a good drummer. My drummer was actually lousy. I needed a good drummer. I wanted this guy, or this guy, or maybe even this guy. Now, this was my drummer. He was horrible. The good news was I didn't have to pay him a lot of money. Bad news, I got what I paid for. But otherwise, I had a pretty normal childhood. No trips home in the back of a police car. I was able to avoid all of that. My parents thought that I was pretty smart too. And they decided, now this was back in the 60s, they decided they wanted to take me to have my brain mapped. There was a big thing going on back in those days where there's all this medical stuff. Oh, you can improve your child by having them do this and having them do that. So they set up this brain mapping thing. Now the brain mapping, it was a fairly simple setup for what I considered was a pretty complex scientific process. It involved a kind of like a head enclosure and some vacuum tubes and a $1,000 check made out to cash. So they sent me in, they did this whole thing, and this is the actual information they got back from the company that did the brain mapping. This was my brain. You know, for a 6-year-old kid, that's pretty normal, you know. There's not a lot of heavy lifting going on in that brain when I was 6 years old. I learned to ride a bike when I was 5. I lost my baby teeth at the appropriate time. At age 8, I stole a candy bar from a local drugstore. And 30 minutes later, riddled with guilt, I returned a gently used candy bar from the same drugstore. When I was 10, I got my first bike. How many of you remember the Stingray? Oh, was this a sweet ride or what? It had a high-rise handlebars, a banana seat, the 5-speed gear shifter on the center bar. Oh man, this thing was great. This was like the Batmobile of bicycles. It was nimble, it was quick, it was maneuverable. And at that very young age, this thing was a chick magnet. Yeah. It wasn't my bike. This was my bike. A girl's pink Schwinn bicycle, handed down from my sister. Complete with the pink basket, the pink streamers from the handlebars, the pink bell. I hated this bike. But I rode this thing for a long time. The one thing this bike did do is it made me tough. Because I got beaten up every day I rode that bike through the neighborhood. I got ready for college. I graduated from high school, went on to college. And I think that even though I was ready to go to college, my brain wasn't really ready to go to college. My brain had only developed 18 years. I'm still a kid, basically. So here's my brain early on when I was about 5. 13 years later, here's my brain again, or what I imagined my brain was. A couple things changed, a couple remained the same. But I really wasn't ready for the college experience. In spite of that, I did pretty well my first year. And then I went home for summer break, and something happened. And I gotta be honest with you, I don't know what it was. My focus was pulled. I wasn't a smart student, I was distracted. I went back for my second year, and I basically went from one end of the scholastic achievement scale to the other. And I'm sure there were reasons why this happened. And again, I could think about what I did, what I could have done differently. Well, let me think. I got nothing. I don't know why I was such a failure, but I ended up eventually graduating from Bowling Green. How many Falcons do we have out here, Falcons? Yeah! Graduated from Bowling Green State University. My first job out of college was with a company I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. This was the company to work for back in the early 80s. It's a Fortune 500 company, well respected in the community. One of the things that Dana had that I loved was this very cool motto. To work for a company that felt this way about their employees, I thought that I would spend the rest of my professional life at Dana Corporation. I'd be wearing nice suits to work, wingtip shoes, I'd be flying on the corporate jet. I couldn't wait to get a key to the mentor, particularly because of my early childhood success in a similar area. And I really thought that I would spend the rest of my professional life at Dana. And I figured I would be rewarded after 30 years with a gold watch by a grateful company for a job well done. That was what I thought. Dana had other ideas. Remember that motto I told you about that I thought was so cool? They changed it very briefly to more accurately reflect their opinion of me. 2.5 years, baby. They don't give me a watch for that. So I spent the next couple of years kind of stumbling around trying to figure out what I wanted to do for a living. And I eventually ended up in the medical field. I got a job with a physician's practice right here in Toledo. And I learned, I loved this job. I loved the physician job. I was working with smart people. It was a clean location in which to work. I loved the intellectual challenge. And I especially loved the opportunity to learn more about the patient-provider relationship. This was about the same time that I was enticed by the siren song of stand-up comedy. There's a career move for you. I thought I was a pretty funny guy. I thought I could write some stuff. They were doing an open mic at a local club in Toledo. I thought I'm going to get together, put together some time, rehearse it, and on a Tuesday night, I got up and spoke in front of, and delivered my first time on stage to about 20 of my closest friends. And it was, honestly, the most excruciating stand-up comedy ever heard in the city of Toledo. Well, in the contiguous United States, well, okay, let's be honest, it was pretty bad. I sucked. I was horrible. But it was like I had made the line, poorly written material, weak premises, bad transitions, and forced supportive laughter directly into my veins. I was hooked, man. I couldn't believe it. It was so exciting to stand up and have the attention of an audience and have them laugh at the appropriate times. So I kept working on it. And after a couple of years, I started traveling around the United States. I traveled all over the eastern part of the United States, did a little bit out on the West Coast. And it was a ball. I loved it. I loved entertaining for people. I spent 4 years in LA because I kind of got into that. I thought, well, I'm going to go to LA and I'm going to become an actor. And I got a real quick clip of my shining moment in LA, which came in about 3 weeks after I moved there and I got settled in. Now, just to give you a real quick prelude, the show that I'm about to show you was a show that I had sworn I would never have anything to do with because I thought it was so awful. No offense to fans. I remember sitting with my girlfriend saying, I would never want anything to do with this show. It's just terrible. A couple days later, I get a phone call from Central Casting. They're looking for somebody to play a referee on an episode of Saved by the Bell.
No kissing anymore.
By the way, that blue arrow, I put that in, that wasn't in the original drawing. That's what I went out there for. I went out there to be an actor. I never booked another thing in the entire 4 years I was there. But I still got that, and it airs about 3 times a week, I think, still. My nephew, who's 31, will call me up and say, I just saw you in Saved by the Bell. About this time, though, I'm doing all this. I've been in LA, I've been doing stand-up, and I started to have a crisis of purpose. Vic talked about it a little bit, having a purpose. I started thinking, geez, what am I doing? There are people out there doing important work. There are people pulling people from burning buildings. There are people defending our country on foreign soil. I'm telling jokes to drunks and bars. What am I doing? I was not cut out for that last thing. Military, that is not me. Honestly, there is not enough of these in the world. The first time I'm in a situation like this, I'm telling you right now. But I called my sister, who has always been my touchstone. She was a social worker, and she does mindfulness training now. And I said, yeah, I'm struggling with this doing jokes thing. She said, don't negate the power of humor. Humor is really powerful. You may be at a comedy club delivering your material to someone who's had a rough day. Maybe he's had a relationship problem. Maybe he just got fired from his job. You don't know what kind of effect you have on people when they're struggling, if they can go somewhere and get a release for a while and laugh. Put a whole new spin on the whole idea of comedy for me. Now, trust me, you saw my brain. I was never going to be one of these guys. They didn't have it in me. It's not in my DNA. But I thought maybe I could tie somehow my purpose into the health side. This idea of humor being so important was brought home to me just about 10 years ago. Really solid when my dad got sick. Let me introduce you to my dad. Bill Hofbauer. He was born in 1918. He was a member of the Depression era kids. He was one of these guys. He served in the Navy and he helped save the world from Adolf Hitler. My dad was also a very funny guy. Kind of a silly funny, a goofy funny guy, but he had a great sense of humor. And we suspect that maybe he had a hideous face when he was younger. Well, the jury's still out on this. And my dad, although he supported me in all my crazy things, he supported me doing stand-up, he would get worried because I wasn't doing something, a real job. He'd say, why don't you go down to the refinery? They're hiring down there. It's shift work, it's dirty work, it's hard work. It's $25 an hour and it's security. And I'd say, Dad, there's no way I could do that kind of work. I said, and by the way, I'm who I am because of you. I inherited your sense of humor, so shut up. Now, my dad worked in construction all his life. He was a 40-year smoker. And so as he got older, he started to have a lot of health problems. And he had just about every health problem you could possibly imagine. I'll tell you something, those hammer toes, oh my God. Those are not for the faint of heart. That is the stuff of nightmares right there. At one point, I had to take my dad to see his lung doctor. And the lung doctor said, well, your father's going to have to be on oxygen 24/7. And my dad, typical of my dad, he fought it like crazy. He didn't want to wear that thing around. He wanted to carry the oxygen tank around. Eventually, he got to the point where he was comfortable with the oxygen. And it did help him quite a bit. One winter, he's out to dinner with my mother and a couple friends, and they're walking out of a restaurant, and he slips on some ice, and he falls and he breaks his hip. And he says, one of the things he says to my mom is, why is it when old people break their hip, they die? So my dad was already looking down that long, dark road. Well, I went to see him that night in the hospital when he first got admitted for his broken hip. And I'm standing in the room there and talking to my dad, and I noticed that he doesn't have his oxygen. There's an oxygen feed on the back wall, but it's not in his nose. So the nurse comes in, and she kind of grunts at me. And I said, as nice as I could be, and here's why I was as nice as I could be. I didn't want to be nasty to his healthcare workers and have them get mad at me and take it out of my dad when myself or my brothers or sister weren't in the room to protect him. So I said, as nice as I could, I said, you know, my dad is supposed to be on oxygen 24/7. And she said, well, it's not in his chart. I said, well, I understand that. You know, I've worked in the medical field. I get it. But I just want you to know I'm his son, and he is supposed to be on oxygen 24/7. She said, well, sir, it is not in his chart. But you don't say that to me twice. We had words in the room, and then we went outside and we had a couple words in the hall. Now let me ask you real quick, who from a nurse's perspective would have responded to my comment that way? Yeah, right? Anybody have a suggestion of what you might say in a situation like that? Incorporating a little laughter, a little lightness, a little levity? How about something like, oh, those doggone doctors, I'm telling you, if they lose their head, they're screwed down. Let me go find out what's going on. I would have been perfectly happy. So, the damage to something like this can be very far-reaching. No longer did I trust the nurse who was taking care of my dad. I didn't trust the technicians. I didn't trust his doctors. I didn't trust the hospital, Our Lady of Perpetual Screw-Ups. No, I was not happy. Now the other thing is, my dad is laying right there, and I thought, well, geez, I thought, I wonder if he heard this. I wonder if he had heard this exchange that I had with the nurse. And I thought, well, there's no way, because he was admitted, along with a broken hip, with a raging UTI. And if you've ever been around an old person who's got one of those, they are loopy. So I'm pretty sure that he was probably reliving his war days in Hawaii, or admiring the beautiful cruise ship parked right outside of his hospital room window, even though we were miles from the nearest lake, river, stream, or other body of water. It concerned me that he might have overheard that. And that's why I kind of got angry with her and took her out in the hall. I still think somewhere in that tangled mess that was going on in his head, he probably did hear. And it probably affected him a little bit. By the way, I get it. Healthcare professionals are overworked. They have less time to do what they need to do. They have more patients often. The staffs are often cut. Sometimes the money maybe isn't as good as it used to be. And it's not just in healthcare. This happens in every profession out there. People feel stressed. But going back to medicine, I don't care. That's my dad in that bed. He raised me. He took me on, I'm sorry, it's going to take me a minute. He took me on my first canoe trip when I was 12. He gored his hands every Christmas putting toys together for his 5 kids. He went to every wrestling match I had in high school. He supported me when I made my first film, and he's supported me in every crazy idea I've ever had since then. He's my hero. And when I come to his defense because he can't, I don't want pushback from his healthcare profession. This isn't just nurses. With the experience with my dad, he struggled all the time with nurses, with technicians, with the people who worked at the nursing home where he was at. I hate to say it, with a couple hospice people. It was not pleasant. And I thought, if you could at least have a better, lighter touch, maybe include a little humor in your care of these patients like my dad, it might make a big difference. It would certainly make a big difference in his life. And the thing is, when I have a problem like that, if I have a good experience, I tell a few people. If I had a bad experience like I had with this nurse, I tell everybody, because I got a big mouth. So what is laughter? The dictionary definition of laughter is an explosive expulsion of air as a reaction to mirth or humor. Why is laughter so important? Laughter has been proven to reduce pain. Laughter increases job performance. As Dick said, his whole idea, all these things, that laughter slides right in there with all those other things that he was talking about. And some of the stuff that Janet talked about this morning. It helps people connect to one another. The distance between two people is very short when you're laughing. It forces oxygen into the heart and the lungs. There's a guy from the American College of Cardiology. His name is Dr. Michael Miller. And he's done some research. This is not supposed to. He's done some research about the importance of laughter. And he says that laughter offsets the impact of mental stress. How about that? So it's important to laugh just for your mental well-being. Whether you're in the healthcare field or in any other field. Laughter is good for you. Laughter is believed to release endorphins. Not the endorphins, not Cynthia and Ralph Endorphin, who live down the street and go to the hospital once a year for their couples colonoscopy. Not them. I'm talking about endorphins. Endorphins are those amino acid things that give you an overall sense of well-being. It can help you to relax. Maybe not quite this much, but laughter does help you relax. It can help you strengthen your immune system. It can help fight off those nasty, annoying bugs. It can relieve or help ease chronic pain. Laughter can improve creativity. It can actually help in problem solving. And believe me, if you've looked around our country recently, there's a lot of problems that need to be solved. Maybe if we laugh a little bit more, we might solve a few more. There are financial implications involved with laughter. There's a great book by a guy named Malcolm Gladwell, one of my favorite authors. It's called Blink. And I want to read just a very brief passage to you because I can't really put it in my own words better than he does. But he talks about how important laughter is, humor is, a light touch is. This book, Blink, is about how we thin slice things. We can make decisions about things, but very quickly, without having to have a lot of knowledge, because we have a lot of experience, we have a lot of life experience. So in this book, he talks about doctors and lawsuits, medical lawsuits. So I'm just going to read this brief little passage for you. Patients file lawsuits because they're harmed by shoddy medical care and something else happens to them. What is that something else? It's how they were treated on a personal level by their doctor. What comes up again and again in malpractice cases is that patients say they were rushed or ignored or treated poorly. People don't just sue doctors they like, is how Alice Birkin, who's a leading medical malpractice lawyer, puts it. In all the years I've been in this business, she says, I've never had a potential client walk into my office and say, I really like this doctor, and I feel terrible about it, but I'm going to sue him. We've had people come in, she's still talking about her practice, we've had people come in saying they want to sue some specialist. And we'll say, we don't think the doctor was negligent, we think that it's your primary care physician who was at fault. And the client will say, I don't care what she did. I love her and I'm not suing her. How about that? And you know what it comes from? It comes from a lightness of touch. It comes from a doctor spending 3 more minutes with the patient in a room, asking questions, actively listening when the patient speaks. It's amazing what little difference that makes. Now, I'm not saying that you can be a lousy doctor and just be friendly and you can have all the lawsuits you want because no one's going to sue you. That's not my point. My point is you're making a connection with that person by being light, by being humorous. Really powerful. Invite humor into your life. It's not that. How many people think they're funny people? Okay. Wow. Okay, I have a little work to do. So how do you bring humor into your life? You don't have to be Bob Hope to okay, probably a lot of people don't know Bob Hope used to educate the truth, World War II, Vietnam, very funny guy. Okay, you don't have to be Jerry Seinfeld to be humorous. You don't have to be Ellen DeGeneres to be humorous. You don't have to be Kevin Hart to be funny. Everybody has the ability to be humorous. This guy, Attila the Hun, I have it on good authority that he was known in private circles as Attila the Fun. That's the worst joke ever. In one of our worst times in our country, this man was a very funny man. Abraham Lincoln is known for his sense of humor. This guy was funny. Remember when he was overseas and that guy threw that shoe at him? Funny guy. This guy's very funny. Have you ever seen him at the correspondence dinner? He's a very funny guy. He knows how to tell a joke. So how do you do it? How do you learn to be funny if you're not funny, like the majority of you seem to think you are? Not funny. I'm going to tell you this by relating a story when I lived in LA. I moved out there with my girlfriend at the time. We'd been together for a year when we moved out, and we were there together in LA for 2 years until we broke up. And I'd been out of the dating circuit for about 3 years. In LA, they have this service, it's called the Learning Annex. And the Learning Annex is a place where you can go to take a class and, oh, maybe you want to become a reader for the studios. Or you want to become a personal assistant to a celebrity. There was a class at the Learning Annex called Learn How to Flirt. And it was being presented by the woman who wrote this book. I had a copy of her book. I thought, I'm going to take this class. It's 25 bucks. How bad can it be? So I drive all the way out to Lowe's, Santa Monica, beautiful hotel right over the ocean, which is where the seminar was going to be held. And I walked into the room, and there were 25 people in this room. And as I walked in, I looked around and I thought to myself, what a bunch of losers. And then I realized, oh my gosh, I'm a loser too. But she had some very interesting tips about flirting, and these apply with laughter. She said, when you're flirting, when you're trying to get back into the dating scene, you need to make contact, significant contact, with 10 people a day and twice that many on weekends. That's 90 people a week. You have to go up to people you don't know and say, hi, how are you? Then she said you have to practice. The reason you want to do this 90 times, she said, it's a numbers game. But she said you also want to practice. You want to get used to flirting with people you don't know. So when you come up to flirt with someone you really want to get to know, you don't get all tongue-tied. Flirt with the girl who checks you out at the grocery store. Flirt with the pizza guy. Don't flirt with this guy. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's Tarzan, first panel. In his mind, okay? How do you do? My name's Tarzan, and I believe you are known as Jane. Second panel. Still swinging. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Tarzan, Lord of the Jungle, and you? Third frame. Still swinging. You must be Jane. I am Tarzan. It's a pleasure to meet you. Next frame. He lands on the branch that she's on. He thinks to himself, there she is. Meet Tarzan, you Jane. The last frame is him going, damn. You gotta practice. Same thing with humor. Practice humor. Practice being humorous. I have an experience when I work for the doctors that I'll tell you, this has actually been studied and it's proven that it happens and that it's detrimental to a doctor-patient relationship. I would have gone into one of the exam rooms with the doctor, and he was talking to this woman, and when he got done talking to her, he put his hand on the doorknob. And he said, now, do you have any questions for me? And she said, no, doctor, I was a witness. She said, no, I'm good. Well, she came down the hall to my room where I was going to run a test on her. And the first thing she said when she got in the room was she asked me a question about a medical condition. I said, you know, I'm sorry, you're going to have to talk to the doctor about that. I'm just a technician. She said, oh, the doctor seems so busy, I didn't want to bother him. Got to be open. Another thing to do to bring more laughter and more humor in your life is smile more often. A smile is halfway to a laugh. It's easy to do, it's cheap. I don't know how many people walk down the street like I do. You pass somebody, you say hello, and they kind of grumble at you. They look at you like, who are you talking to me? Smile back. It's amazing what a difference that can make in your day, especially if you're having a rough day. Now I get it, some people are dealing with other things, but take that moment to smile, to be just a little lighter for just a second. It doesn't cost anything. Surround yourself with funny people. You can't have these people. These are my funny people. You got to get your own funny people. But surround yourself with people who like to have a good time. It's infectious. It will rub off on you eventually. Use funny stories or cartoons whenever possible. I love when I go into an office setting and there are people who have these funny cartoons on their desk. I love the looks on the faces of the dogs. I love the rabbit sitting there waiting to do the surgery. This is on the Ellen Show, so I don't feel so bad showing it. Everybody get it? Humor is sometimes dependent on the situation you're in. Okay? You got to be careful when you're delivering funny material. When my dad passed away, we all gathered at the funeral home to set up his funeral. And the funeral director said, you know, your dad is entitled to a military funeral because he was in the Navy. We said, well, what does that involve? He said, well, we can drape a flag over his casket. You can have hats played at the gravesite. and you can have a 21-gun salute. This was great. And he said also, we can release some doves, which is a very nice touch. They fly up, they fly around, they disappear, they come back to us later, but it's a very nice moment. And so being my dad's kids, we all said, you know what? If you take those 21-gun salute guys, make sure they're locked and loaded and have good aim, and you release those doves, we got a hot meal at the reception. We spent about 2 hours with the funeral director, and at the end he said, I've never laughed so much setting one of these things up. This was so much fun. And I've had people say, oh, that's so offensive. That was offensive to your dad to be laughing while you're setting up the funeral. No, it wasn't offensive. This was my dad. He would have loved it. We cried a lot that day, but we also laughed a lot, and it was celebrating the memory of his life. It was celebrating his life. So sometimes laughter, even in a situation like that, can take the edge off, it can make you feel a little better about it. Another thing you can do is seek out funny entertainment. This was an improv troupe that I ran for about 17 years. Go to see funny plays. Go to see stand-up comedians at the comedy club. Do something to expose yourself to humor. Lots of funny movies. How many are familiar with the story of Norman Cousins? Get your hands up if you've heard of it. He got very sick, had cancer, and he decided after researching what the treatments were that were available to him, he decided to treat himself with massive amounts of vitamin C and watching funny movies and TV shows. And it really worked for him. I mean, there's a lot of information out there about him on the internet, but it was very helpful for him to have this infusion of humor in his everyday life. Watch funny TV shows. One of my favorites is Seinfeld. And when my family, we all love Seinfeld. When my family gets together, we all quote Seinfeld. And we have a lot of fun with it, because every situation in life has a reflective situation on the Seinfeld show. Have a laugh at your own expense. This is me with a very popular mullet. This is me with an undiagnosed medical condition. Be brave when it comes to being humorous. Stick your toe in the water. You're probably not going to have a lot of pushback, all right? Because people like to laugh. Now, don't be fooled by appearances. Sometimes people have sort of a nasty, just arresting face. We've all heard the term. That doesn't mean they aren't funny. Sometimes these people can be the funniest people out there. My brother, when he was going to law school, he was putting himself through law school, he worked at Toledo Hospital, was Toledo Hospital then, for America, in their cath lab. And he basically took people, put them in a wheelchair, took them back to where they were going to have their procedure, and then he'd bring them back when they were done. And he'd put them in a chair, and sometimes in the wintertime it would get cold in the waiting room, and he would say things like, would you like a warm blanket? Oh, yes, I love a warm blanket. Well, that'll be $10. It's not brilliant humor, but he teased with them. And the people really liked having him be their guy who took them back and forth from the procedure. It was just a lighter touch. It's really easy to do, and you don't have to overthink it. I did some training for Sunoco several years ago in Philadelphia. I was doing my newsproof presentation training. And I had to stay right there at the airport at the Four Points Hilton, or Four Points Sheridan, or whatever. It's a Four Points hotel. And there was not a 4 to 5 mile a day run. There was no place for me to run because it was the airport and it was the hotel. I tried running in the parking lot of the hotel, and that was not a good idea. So I thought, well, I'm just going to go down to the gym in the hotel and run on a treadmill. I'm not a treadmill runner. I've never been a treadmill runner, but I thought I got to work out. So I put on my clothes and I go down there, and there's a guy on a treadmill already in the room. And he's running. He looks great. I'm telling you, the guy was handsome. He was chiseled. He looked like the guy on the front of the Men's Fitness magazine. And he's running very confidently. So I get in there, and I got my iPod, and I got my earbuds, and put my iPod on the console of the treadmill. I put my earbuds in, and I turn the thing on, and I start to run, and it's going pretty good. And the next thing I know, my arm hits the cord connecting my earbuds to my iPod. The iPod falls down on the deck of the treadmill and shoots off the back. I am in hot pursuit right behind it. I stop, I look over at the guy, he's got a little smirk on his face. Went over and I picked up my iPod, put that thing back on the console, put my earbuds in and started it back up. I'm doing pretty good. Put up the speed a little bit, going a little better. Once again, I swear, the cord starts swinging, my hand hits it, it goes down on the deck of the tripod, the treadmill shoots off the back. Again, I am in hot pursuit behind it. Now the guy's got a little bit more of a sticker on his head. I pick up my iPod, put it on there, and I take those earbuds and I jam them in my ears like I'm doing a cochlear implant. And this time, after I take it off, I'm going to hold on to the thing. I'm going to have it in my hand. There's no way I'm going to lose it. I start running again, that cord starts to swing. Third time, it goes down. I'm going really fast this time. It shoots off the back of the treadmill like a rocket. I am right behind it. I slam into the back wall. And the guy's laughing. And I wanted to say, hey, this is hard! And I thought, he's not having a problem. So it took like 5 seconds. And I thought, don't ruin this guy's day. Finally I said, you know what? I don't think this is for me. He said, nah, I don't think it is either. That was the last time I ever ran on a treadmill. We can choose how we respond or react to something. I could have been a jerk and ruined that guy's day and ruined my day. Instead I said, you know what? I'm just going to relax a minute and have the reaction that I should have. And I found some humor in it. Sometimes that's all it takes. You don't have to be hilarious. You can just start out with a lightness of spirit and move from there. Find that light touch. You've got to change your brain just a little bit in order to do that. Look for humor every day, wherever you are. Here's a guy some of you may know his product. It's Jerry Greenfield. He's from Ben & Jerry's. And this is what he says about his workspace. He actually brings in humor coaches to help his people find humor. They do workshops where they do nothing but laugh. What a great idea. Take that home to your families, to your friends, to your life outside of work. I think it's brilliant. I love this quote. How many wasted days do you want to have out there? I don't want any more. Try to be humorous as much as I can. So what did we learn today? Let me just do a real quick recap. We learned that I was a candy bar thief when I was young. I had a pink girl's bike. I looked darn good in a mullet. And laughter is good for relieving stress. But you have to practice in order to use it effectively. It has benefits far beyond just feeling better. But you know what? There's nothing like just feeling better. Look for humor every day at work and in your life. And I guarantee your life will get better. My best advice, take a shot. I'm Tom Hofbauer. Thank you very much for your attention.